Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi. I recently completed my 2-month transformational leadership program, and the results were powerful. If you want to live an exciting life and fulfill your highest potential in 2023 and beyond, I have an incredible opportunity for only a few more individuals to join the next cohort. I will personally be coaching a small group on how to discover and clear your limiting beliefs, how to manage your energy instead of your time, how to tap into the power of your intuition, and how to use discernment so that you can start living a life full of ease, abundance, and flow. As someone who has helped countless entrepreneurs and CEOs open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I can tell you that this strategy will completely transform your life. Best part, you'll 10x your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly to overcome your limiting beliefs and transform that into a new self-concept. I'll teach you how to create clarity, systems, and processes, and I'll also help you develop your intuition. You'll get access to some of the best material that will also help you manage your energy, and you'll get access to guided meditations that are not available anywhere else. This method is so effective. If you'd like to join the waitlist, you can find the link in the show notes or navigate to www.yasminterehi.com/gateways-to-awakening/. Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Today's episode is with Freddy Silva. He's a best-selling author, leading researcher of ancient civilizations, restricted history, sacred sites, and their interaction with consciousness. He's also the leading expert on crop circles, and he's published 8 books in 6 languages and produced 14 documentaries. And right now he is described as perhaps the best metaphysical speaker in the world right now for 2 decades. He's been an international keynote speaker, and he's been on Gaia TV, the History Channel, and hundreds of radio shows. I learned about Freddy through Dr. Francesca McCartney, so I want to give her a big shout out. And I'm so excited to welcome him to the show. So welcome to the show, Freddy.
Hello, Yasmin.
So, Freddy, to kick it off, I'd love to get a sense from you what ancient civilization has piqued your interest the most and why?
All of them. And the reason why I say that is because they're all interlinked. When we go back into the deep past, there's actually no such thing as civilizations that were working by themselves. It turns out that when you research these people and you actually ask them for their personal histories, because after all, they were much more connected to their histories than the academics ever were, it turns out that they're all interconnected. And that's what I find interesting about our ancient past is that everyone, from whether you're in South America, you'll be talking to people in Egypt, and the people in Egypt will be talking to people in Japan, and the people in Japan will be talking to people in the Yucatan. And it's surprising to find these connections by people who, as far as we've been told, were nothing more than hunter-gatherers. They didn't get around much, but it turns out that they were getting around much more than we give them credit for. They were master astronomers, great seafarers, and traveling the Pacific for them was as easy as you and I going shopping for a can of baked beans. And that's what excites me about all these people, that they were all basically working together towards a common end, which is essentially, how to live a better life, how to make the best of your life here on the planet, but also to share with other people the knowledge that they had experienced so that other people might take the experience and project themselves further upward in their stage of evolution. So I kind of find that very sort of exciting and also very positive, least of all because of the kind of state that we've let ourselves into in this particular day and age where we're all fighting over things. It was never like that. So these people serve as a great foundation for achieving a much better life, if you like.
Wow. And were these ancient civilizations, were they tapping into their intuition and into the sort of metaphysical world? Like, how are they able to, some of the things that have just come out of these ancient civilizations have blown my mind. And so I'm just curious, how are they able to tap into that kind of wisdom, this primordial wisdom and knowledge? What have you seen across the board?
Oh, I saw three definite scenarios. I mean, there's always one where it's quite possible that people just by sheer experience or the shamanic ability to contact plants, animals, which is what people in the Serengeti and in the Amazon do. I mean, they'll tap into the spirit of the plant because they are so connected to the natural world around them that they're able to bring back information from even the rock, a river, anything, because they consider everything to have a consciousness. That's one element. The second element is that, again, through experimentation with various narcotics, you can also access a much finer level of reality and extract information from that reality and bring it back and make it very plausible and practical. And that's something that's still practiced in many parts of the world by indigenous people. And then, of course, there's the written traditions and the oral traditions that state that once upon a time, about 12,000 years ago, we were living side by side with a parallel civilization of what they describe as people who were human-like but not quite human. And they were much different to indigenous people. They tend to be described as quite tall, not giantess, but quite tall, usually about 8.5 feet tall. They were very light skinned, apparently, and incredibly, they're also blonde, blue eyed, and red haired and green eyed, which is very strange when you hear that in South America and Polynesia, because you shouldn't have people that otherwise would be known as Caucasian around those regions 12,000 years ago. And yet, their old traditions have maintained that these are the people that became known as gods. And not because they were worshipped. It's actually a very big fallacy. What was happening is that there was a cooperation going on between this parallel culture and average hunter-gatherers in a way of cultural exchange. And a god back then really meant someone who had complete understanding of the laws of nature and could harness those laws and bend those laws within the confines of the laws themselves. So we tend to think of gods through the Western tradition of Christianity, where it's all some white guy with a beard dishing out brimstone from a chair up in the sky. But to ancient people, it was very, very different. And I know this sometimes gets me into trouble with the woke movement, but it's very misjudged because these are the accounts from the people themselves. Um, there was no sense of superiority of one race over another. There was a cooperation between people. And they were the ones who said that they gave humans the accoutrements of civilization, bit by bit, gradually, because they said that this group of humanoids was they'd already been on Earth for a considerable amount of time, and their time had come and was already on the wane. And before a great catastrophe wiped just about everybody off 11,000 years ago, they were able to provide human settlements with, agriculture, animal husbandry, mathematics, the understanding of stars, travel through water, and so forth. And it was from this that we also get the ancient wisdom teachings. And one of the oldest ones that I've tracked is in Japan. And it's around 8,000 BC. We have a series of 17 teachings which form a book called the Kujiki 72. And they are described as the Way of Ise, which is essentially the name of Isis in Japan, which again makes you wonder how on earth an Egyptian goddess ends up in Japan in 8,000 BC. But those teachings eventually became the foundation of spiritual development within the Far East. And you find the same teachings again in India in about 6,600 BC. And slowly they make their way to the Near East in 2000 BC with the Essenes and the Mandeans. And of course, a guy called Yeshua ben Yosef who learned this stuff from the Essenes and then went on to not found the Christian religion because he never wanted it to start any movement, but essentially he kick-started this understanding of spiritual development that was embodied in these traditions that goes back much, much further back than this Jesus that we know. And the funny thing is that we also find these teachings in the middle of the Yucatan in South America, in Northern Africa, and in Egypt. So it's as part of this worldwide devolution of information that led people, well, it led us to where we are today in terms of the spiritual doctrines that we preach and we search for. These are very, very old systems of knowledge. And despite the fact that we all sort of look at the documentaries on television and buy tons of books, there really is nothing new about them. They're just rewritten for a new audience of the day. They use slightly different verbs and pronouns, but essentially they're the same teaching. So this is pretty much the three ways in which humans sort of began to understand the knowledge. And there's, of course, a fourth way, if you're so inclined, which is we were visited by aliens, which is not outside of the realm of impossibility, because so many of the best memories of interaction with alien cultures, which are not from this planet, also come from indigenous people, and particularly in Central America and also with the Hopi. So there is a fourth option, but whichever one you choose, that's pretty much where all these things came from.
Fascinating. And so I also just want to double click on, you mentioned the Essenes. For those listening in who may not have heard of them, can you sort of define, who they are and some of the specific teachings that came from them? Because I think that generally has been shared a lot, but a lot of folks may not understand who they are.
Well, the Essenes were essentially a kind of brotherhood and sisterhood who lived in the time of Jesus, and their roots really go back into the Middle East and India. If you take what they were preaching, it's essentially a reformation of other groups, and this is essentially the group with whom Jesus was associated. And one of the things that gives the game away was the fact that he talks about in the Bible, talking about, follow me, I am the way. Well, the way is essentially what the teachings of Japan and China in 8000 BC were called. They were called the Tai, or the Tao, as we call them. So the Essenes were yet another sect, or a cult, if you like, in the positive sense of the word, that went around practicing the mysteries of self-development and self-enlightenment.
Wow. I'd like to talk a little bit about these. You call them power places, I think, in your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about where these places are, and where places within the world have significant different types of energy and what that means?
Oh, they're everywhere. Just like you have meridian points on your body, so the Earth also has its own meridians, and these can be moved at will. It's not that difficult to move these points of energy, because they basically are electromagnetic by nature, and so is the human body. So when you put your mind to it, you can actually move these sort of pathways of invisible force to where you want them, and then you can anchor them with special stone or crystal to make sure they never go away. So places like the pyramids, Stonehenge, those are some of the most popular portals. And the stones are really just there to mark the location where the Earth's telluric currents happen to intersect. And of course, when you step on these currents, your body starts to slowly drift away into a slightly different radio station. It's not that difficult to do. And unless you sort of are so predetermined not to experience this, I think pretty much everyone who goes to these places has this unusual connection with this other level of reality. So the portals can be very small as well. I mean, there are places in New Mexico, for example. There's a hill of the Tewa people outside of Santa Fe, and you climb to the top of the hill, and that's their sacred site. And you'll travel there for hours, and you get to the summit and you'll see absolutely nothing. And you wonder, was this really worth it? Yes, it was, because for the native people, they didn't need to mark the portals because they couldn't see them. They're so attached to the land. They see the subtle movement of energy with their inner vision, and they're able to feel exactly where these natural forces create a sort of an eddy in the landscape. So whenever you're feeling a little bit out of sorts and out of touch with your environment, and with the bigger picture, you just go and hike to these little places and then sit there, meditate, and slowly the frequencies that are fundamental to these portals will start to alter the frequencies in your body that have become attuned to a different radio station, usually one that's not particularly good for you. And they slowly invite you to step back into that realm of perfection and balance. And they're literally everywhere. For example, right now when I'm talking to you from downtown Portland, Maine, I happen to be in my living room, exactly in the only location where I can place my desk and my computer. And there's one of these telluric currents running right through the building, exactly where I'm sitting. It's almost as though the apartment was ordained to have me, and I chose it after sort of carefully selecting many others, because I felt there's something very special about this location. And so from here, in this very simple place in a city in America, I'm actually now connected to every single sacred site around the world. So any portal that I want to access is now within my grasp, because I'm on that conveyor belt. And that's what makes it really interesting, is the fact that this is a practical information. It's a practical technology. And these things are everywhere. And the best way to find them in the modern world is usually just to sort of, not really fixate on looking for energy, but just tell your body, is there a place here where I can feel perfectly at ease with my environment? And your gut feeling will lead you to a place, whether it's a park, a coffee shop, maybe it's even a place where taxis are parked, because you'd be amazed how many of these portals, which are now superseded by cities, are still active. And you often know it because you'll feel a certain connection to the landscape, even though you're living in a modern environment. So just because we don't use large stones anymore doesn't mean that these places are not also available to us in our everyday world.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, I'm very, very sensitive to energy, and I can feel certain places and spaces. And I was actually just in Santa Fe last weekend in Taos, and the energy there was extremely intense. Like, so those places, I don't know, for whatever reason, and I'm curious if you have that kind of reaction, but for me, it feels like I'm extremely tired, and there's like almost some kind of massive shift that happens to me when I'm in those places. Sedona is another one. When I was in South America, in Peru, I want to say by Machu Picchu, I felt it. Yeah, and I'm curious. Oh, Mount Shasta also. Curious, like, is that a reaction that happens to people, or is everyone kind of different?
Oh, it's very much a reaction, and it also depends on where you are in the landscape of things, because each one of us is different. So some people will find Peru to be very pleasant and alleviating. I find it intense, but that's because of who I am. I find the Egyptian portals much easier to cope with, but it took me a while to get to Peru and appreciate Cusco and Sacsayhuaman and other places like that. And by the time you get to Tiwanaku, I mean, your body's positively vibrating, and you've got to drink a lot of water and chew like a coca leaf just to compensate. But again, it depends on the person and how you're built and how you're experienced. And for some people, I mean, this becomes a bit of a junkie fix, and I have to admit I'm one of them. But again, it depends what your body's looking for.
Mm.
So sometimes you just need to go to a place where it's very subtle. Sedona is very subtle for me. I find the sandstone and the subtlety of the color of the mountains very easy to get along with. Some people are overwhelmed by it. So again, it really comes down to the individual choice. It's a bit like walking into a music store, if they still exist, which I hope they do. It's a bit sad that they don't. It's a bit like walking into a music store, and you like your classical music, and you're hearing punk, and of course, it's not going to go down very easily or very well until you adapt to punk or you reject it. And on the other side of the coin, you could be into heavy metal, and you go into a music store that plays new age music, and you think, "What the hell is that noise?" It's funny how that works, but it's so true, because we're all looking for different things. Our
Mm.
body craves different things, and so we tend to get attracted to the places that has those missing ingredients, so that the body can recalibrate itself. One of the things that people point out when they go with me on tour to these places, or when I'm sort of helping people design portals, is, to be honest, if you know all of this information, you don't really need a physical place in which to connect. And I said, absolutely right, because the body is a temple, and if your temple is aligned to everything and you're in balance, you don't need any third-party accoutrements to help you connect,
Mm.
because you already are there. It's just that you get sort of you forget that you are connected to the center of things and the center of the universe. And a religion that has a good chance of always reminding us that we are disconnected unless you pay someone a lot of money or go into confession to intervene in your behalf, which is absolute nonsense. You already are a god. You cannot be separate from a creative source. So once you believe that, you don't need any third party places to go to. But for me, as a very grounded sort of Taurian, I do like to touch, feel, lick, and eat things. So for me, I do have to go to these places. They're my sort of family. I can't really be without them. And they're everywhere, no matter where you look, even in places like Ohio, where people think, well, it's a very conservative state. There can't be any spirituality here. I'd say you're completely wrong. I've seen more sacred places in Ohio than in many parts of America. There are a lot of mounds there. There's no one buried in them, and they literally are marking the place where the currents happen to intersect. That's why they were put there in the first place. So, if you look hard enough, you'll find these places.
Wow. Fascinating. And hello, fellow Taurus. I can spot my tribe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You have excellent taste.
So I want to talk a little bit about, why this knowledge makes a difference in our modern history today. Why is all this knowledge so important for where we are in history, and also, coming out of the pandemic, and where the human race is going?
Oh, it's very important. It always has been. It's been the antidote to, and I'm going to quote one of the apostles, the antidote to stupidity. They actually wrote that. I think it was Thomas that wrote that. And James said that it's the antidote to mind blindness. And they're absolutely right, because we get so sidetracked by politics and shiny cars and buildings. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but when you start associating with them too much, as Taurians tend to do, ironically, you need to be reminded that there's another side to the coin here, which is about the balance. And that balance is to have one foot in the spiritual and one foot in the physical. That's the way to do it. The teachings are always telling you not to be too lighty or not too darky. You've got to walk the line in the middle, because sometimes you have to do a few dark things to get through the day here on earth in order to promote the light. I'm reminded of what was happening in the Middle Ages, when so many monks were actually better at yielding a sword than they were yielding a pen, simply because of the period. In order for them to preach the mysteries to people who really were illiterate, but were looking for some kind of spiritual doctrine, they literally had to kill people, because they were being killed in their own right. So they had to protect their territory from subversion, from tyranny. And these things have been promulgated from century to century exactly for that reason. And today, and this was something that was also mentioned about 12,000 years ago by the so-called gods, that the reason why they left these instructions for human beings, and they built big temples with enormous stones, was to stand the test of time, until a time when we would lose all these ideas, when we would lose our connection to the divine, and we had to be reminded. And it's no surprise to me that today I see more people visiting these ancient places, and sometimes just because of frivolous tourism, but there are also a lot of people who are going to these places to take in something different. They feel that they need to be connected to a bigger picture, that they're somehow gone astray, and I find people changing for the better.
Wow.
And this is a wonderful antidote for today's times, where, and especially in social media, there's so much propaganda put out there, which is specifically designed to keep the public apart and fighting each other. We're just seeing it yesterday in the elections in the States, for example. Even in Britain, where I come from, it's the same thing with Brexit. All this stuff is divisive. It does not serve us. It serves a very few people. So whenever we find ourselves in those places, and these dark places, then the teachings are there, and they've always have been there, to get you back to, plan A, to remind you there's a better way to do this. Don't sort of forsake the physical world, because there's a reason why you were born here. You can't just, escape to the mountains, become a monk or a hermit for 100 years, and think that your experience here has been solid. I think you've been missing something. You're missing the whole purpose of reincarnation, or incarnation for that matter. The idea is to be here in the physical world, be present, but at the same time be aware that there are tools that you can use to make your life a much more balanced road. And that makes a difference between what the people in India called the corpses and those who are awake.
Wow. Fascinating. And what an incredible reminder, I think, for all of us in modern society to go back to these sacred sites, and to potentially, go on a trip with you, right, to explore some of them, and remember the connection to everything and everyone. I think that, to me, is so important. And it's also my intention for setting up this podcast, is to really unite people. So I thank you for that comment. I'd also like to learn a little bit more about the healing energy of crop circles. It's something that a lot of people have pinged me and have found very interesting and curious. Can you talk to us about this?
Yeah, back in the 1980s and the 1990s, which almost seems like a century away now, we were getting a lot of very unusual reports from people, mostly skeptics, I should point out, that would go to a field in England and they would have these extraordinary sudden healing experiences. And this shouldn't happen to skeptics. I mean, we had people who were allergic to wheat, and yet they'd cross half a mile through a wheat field to go to a crop circle, and then they'd come back completely healed. Uh, this stuff just does not happen to people who are totally resigned to the fact that the crop circles are nothing more than hoaxes, which of course they're not. There are people who make them, but they're not the same thing. And we began to collect all these stories about spontaneous healing. We thought, well, where's this going to go? How can we prove this? And 500 stories later, I actually bumped into a group of people in Germany called the Institute of Resonance Therapy, who, unknowns to us, were actually using images of crop circles to send a healing code to rivers and forests in Central Europe that were dying of pollution. And the results were remarkable. Within 3 years, the revitalization of these places was very evident, and it was highly detailed to the point where even the Austrian government validated this group and even invited them to come and fix a specific problem in the city of Salzburg, which they did, unbeknownst to the local population, and cleared a big black spot in the center of town where people had avoided for decades. And suddenly people were there picnicking overnight. What was fascinating was the fact that this information was not only obtainable from people visiting crop circles, it's the fact that a picture of a crop circle, as long as this hasn't been altered in any electronic way, which is a bit rare these days with the internet and the falsification of imagery, the original photograph captures an essence of the energy of the real crop circle. Now, due to the politics of the crop circle arena, that became also a bit of a problem. And as a graphic designer by trade, and also a person who spent much of his time in England measuring hundreds of crop circles, I had access to all this information. And also I was able to draw the diagrams exactly as they appear on the ground. And it was from the communication with the Institute of Resonance Therapy that I learned of a system, which I can't reveal to anyone under pain of death. It's for its own protection. A system whereby you can transfer the energy of the crop circle onto these special cards. And so we began to sort of experiment with these. And the results were incredible. I mean, it was way beyond what any of us could possibly have expected. I mean, there was people being cured of cancer. There was people being cured of 99% malignant eye tumors and so forth. We had no idea the potential was so huge. But the problem is we have regulatory systems in place to prevent all kinds of people who do alternative medicine to get their product out. So that was a big problem and a big challenge. And then one day, quite by coincidence, I was in Santa Fe at a great conference. And I met a man who is essentially a genius, Konstantin Korotkov, who is one of the leading directors of the St. Petersburg Institute of Medicine and Science. He actually developed a machine whereby you can actually pick up the residual energy of any object, specifically people. And he happened to be in my presentation, and I happened to be in his. And of course, we just connected immediately. And he said, I've been looking at these crop circle cards that you developed, and I have a machine that can probably show you the actual energy field to show that the cards are actually working, which will help you validate this and take it to market. And I thought, well, that would be fantastic if you could do that, because I'm hesitant of bringing this to market because I don't want to seem like I'm some kind of snake oil peddler. And that'd be the last thing I'd want, and also to mislead people. And he said, well, there's a machine up in Taos. Why don't you go and do a blind test? And we did. And sure enough, the pack that had been activated shows an extended energy field around them exactly as we knew existed. And Excuse me. And I actually put a picture of this up on my website to show people the difference. And in 22 years, I have never advertised this healing system. I'm not even allowed to mention the word healing, by the way. Otherwise, the FDA will have me in jail for obvious reasons, which you can read between the lines. But I've never advertised this system, and yet to this very day, they just basically the people find them on my website, and then they're still selling like hotcakes. It's incredible. I've only had one person ever demand their money back because they thought that they were tarot cards, and that says something.
Oh,
And another person that claims to have been very psychic and thought they were portals for evil entities, which, it's like, well, I don't know how I can argue this, because if people are being healed, then obviously they're being healed by evil entities. That can't possibly be correct. There's obviously a problem with this logic. So, yeah, to this very day, no one has ever asked for their money back. So, and some of the responses I get from people, and particularly practitioners in the healing world of alternative medicine, the stories are incredible. And
wow.
I've never ceased to be amazed by the feedback that I get. But the funny thing is, back in the day when hardly anyone knew what a crop circle was, a good friend of mine in England, who's a fantastic and a very gifted psychic, and it runs in her family, she had channeled through the source that was making the crop circles that there were healing modalities to be tapped in the crop circles, and we had
Wow.
no idea what they were talking about at the time. And now, 40 years later, here we are.
Wow. I'm getting massive full body chills in all these conversations. I'm like,
Oh,
whoa.
we call it the tingly winglies. It's a very technical
Yes.
term.
Oh my gosh, wow. Well, I am definitely going to order those cards for sure. I have a dear friend in the regenerative farming space, and is actually one of the pioneers, like leading a lot of things in that world. So I'll definitely share this knowledge with her and her community for sure. Wow. So, Freddie, can you also talk to us about some of your knowledge on UFOs? And we spoke a little bit about aliens, but it's something that a lot of people have been very curious about. I think there's been a lot of information coming out, but I'm curious, like, what the latest and greatest has been on your end, and what you think is important for us to know about how we sort of fit into the cosmos with UFOs and with aliens.
Oddly enough, I've only paid it peripheral attention because my attention is always in so many different pies at the same time. But with crop circles, especially, I rub my shoulders with that sort of entity. And a lot of them are not physical at all. We tend to think of aliens as physical people, and they are. Physical as we are on our level of reality as they are on theirs, but a lot of it's also to do with interdimensional beings, which there's no way we can perceive them except for light, and sometimes they'll travel the landscape as balls of light. And I used to see these, sitting on the giant's grave in England having a sandwich, and to the point where we just yawn. And it's like, there's another ball of light. There we go. And you can communicate with them, and they can communicate back, and they have a very vicious sense of humor as well. But essentially, I was just reading a book by R.D. Six Killer Smith, who's a professor, or used to be a professor at Montana State University, who actually collected some of the best information about the traditions of the native people of Central America and North America. And it was very enlightening to hear from their point of view of the amount of respect that they have for all of these alien people. And there appear to be as many different types of alien visitors as there are people on Earth. As probably as you'd expect, with all things being equal in the universe. So there are very tall Nordic-looking people, which seem to be very svelte and attractive, which is the ones that I like, of course, being the, with Venus ruling Taurus. I mean, you can't stop yourself. And then you got the little grey aliens, which are the ones who are the most notorious ones, who seem to be the ones creating a lot of mischief because they just don't understand humans. They don't understand why humans have emotions or where emotions come from. And you tend to see a lot of people who have negative experiences with alien abductions, mentioning the greys as being but the particularly troublesome ones. But but the same thing also applies to us here on Earth. I mean, how guilty do most people feel about us putting chickens in a coop and dissecting rats in a lab? Well, we probably don't think twice about it. And I think the same thing applies to them. Not that it's right, of course, and I don't agree with it. But still, what happens down here on Earth easily multiplies throughout the universe. But the one thing that did become very obvious, and particularly in relationship to ancient sacred sites and crop circles, particularly, is the fact that they are also used as portals for travelers, because the sites themselves are exactly where the magnetic currents happen to be. So to see a sort of what they call the flying shields in the Hopi tradition landing next to an ancient sacred site in Central America is really no big deal, because they're using these magnetic strips as conveyor belts to get from A to B. And I remember one story of one watchman at Chichen Itza, or nearby. I think it was actually Tikal, I beg your pardon. And he said that it was just incredible to see these people coming out of this, essentially this flying saucer, and they didn't bother using the entrance of the temple. They just went into the stone. So they basically could go through matter as easily as you and I cross one room to the next. And they also have a very big interest in what we're doing down here, because all the things that we do down here, specifically to do with war, these things have repercussions, and they echo into eternity. So they are very much concerned about how we've taken the information that we discussed at the beginning of the program and misused it for all kinds of nefarious means. So they have a vested interest in the outcome of what we're doing right now. And there's a lot of different entities circling around the planet at present. I think Stephen Greer also mentioned this. He's like a pioneer in interstellar communication. They all mentioned that there's a lot of interested parties surrounding the Earth and making the skies very, very busy, because they have a vested interest in what happens down here. And the crop circles are one way of inputting ideas into the Earth grid to allow humans to interact with them, to give ourselves the idea of whether we should go to plan A or plan B. They're offering us a choice. They're not telling us what to do, but they are inputting ideas into the grid. And some people wake up because of their interaction, and some people are reacting negatively, and there's a pushback against it. And you see a lot of it now in the world arena in politics. So many countries suddenly turning to right-wing governments, which is the last thing you'd expect in a system that has been experiencing democracy for the last 100 years. And that's because there's so much resistance to change. These old dinosaurs don't want the old ways to go away. And of course, you can get this black and white movement. So there's a lot of assistance being given to us. And one of the things that I remember from one of the meetings with the channelers was that we, and I quote, "We are more than happy to assist you if you ask us for help, okay? But we can't intervene in the functions of the Earth or human affairs, because the whole the whole purpose of being here is to live your life and experience the world. We cannot violate the first rule of the universe, which is the rule of non-intervention. And Star Trek fans will know this. It's called the Prime Directive. And they're saying we can only suggest, but you have to ask us for assistance. And the way we do it is by making crop circles and putting the information in the crop circles, so then you can go and extract the information and apply it. Or we'll suggest things to certain scientists about technology that gets you away from fossil fuel. And I can say, hand on heart, that there has been an anti-gravity device developed in England, America, and Australia, which is based on a crop circle design. And that's all I can say for now, to protect the safety of the scientists that are involved. So there's a lot of good news in the background. It's just that right now there's so much negativity in the media, not because the media is negative per se, it's because they understand that conflict sells newspapers or that sells podcasts or whatever. It's just the way the humans are wired. We like conflict. We thrive on conflict. I remember a newspaper in Britain at the turn of the century that survived for 26 years publishing nothing but good news, and people got bored of it. So I think fundamentally we're nihilists at heart. We all, even people who pretty much enjoy a new age outlook, and I know so many people in so many countries that practice and preach spirituality, and I watch them saying that the foulest things after COVID and all the experiences that we've had. So I think we're sort of hardwired to get into that negative state. So the idea is that there are a lot of antidotes going around, and we hardly see them, but they are there. I mean, for example, Every once in a while on Facebook, you'll see some enormous and important invention done by a 22-year-old to clear plastic floating in yacht marinas and in ship harbors. And it's the simplest device which just basically floats on the surface and picks up the plastic into this drain, which when it fills up, you just pick it up, put it in the dumpster, and put it back in the ocean. So there are all of these great ideas going around at the moment. But before we see these coming up, you're going to see a lot of darkness because that's just the way things are. So once you start creating a lot of darkness, eventually you also start generating its very own opposite. And it's a principle known in physics as the law of chaos. The more the chaos that you see, the greater the potential jump to a new level of order. So everything in nature has its own balance. So I wouldn't get too downsided about all the negativity because there's already an upside taking place. It's just that it's keeping a low profile so that it doesn't get too many arrows shot at, which is not the way to get attention these days. The people who are doing all the best work keep a low profile. They don't want to have arrows on their backs.
I love that so much, and thank you for also mentioning, the chaos theory, I think is what it's called. And I think because a lot of people sort of, I think, are moving into this sort of despair or polarization, or speaking about like the end of the world, but sort of not really recognizing that. Like you said, like in order for energy to change, it actually has to go through this period of chaos and to shift to a different level. So I'm a big fan of that. And it's interesting what you mentioned about the folks, these folks that are channeling these interdimensional beings or whatever it's called. About wanting to help us and also just really wanting to move humanity forward if we ask and if we pray. And I found that tool of prayer. I sort of like left it for a long time and then found it 6-7 years ago. And it has been so phenomenal to just ask for what you want. I think a lot of people don't do that enough, and especially not ask for what you want, but what humanity needs, like, or what you think humanity needs and how we can co-create a better world. So I'm curious, Freddie, if you have sort of an invocation or a prayer that you think of when it comes to moving humanity forward.
I just drink heavily. That works. We all have our own tools, but seriously, I actually no, I don't. I don't sit there and pray all the time. I was raised as a Catholic, and now I've recovered, I think. So prayer for me is like, oh God, do I have to sit there kneeling with my hands together? I have other ways of doing it, and I find that just having a very clear thought with a lot of passion behind it does it. That's all you need. A simple 3-second thought, an affirmation, or a thought of love and appreciation, and particularly for and I call them people because I see them as people. A lot of the people that help me in my work, in what I write and what I do and what I research, because they're always there. They're very invisible, but I know they're there, and that's a very close relationship that I have with them over the years. I just send them a little bouquet of love in my mind, and in 3 seconds they've got it. That's all you need. And I also have a 3,000 plus album library, which is my psychologist and my psychiatrist. So I have music for everything. That's my form of prayer. If I'm feeling down or extremely exuberant, I find a way of calibrating things by just picking up one album out of 3,000, putting it on and going, oh, I feel much better now. So we all have our different tools. Some people just like their way of prayer is to walk around in a garden or go for a drive. I mean, I can't tell you how exhilarating it is to, get in the Mini Cooper and being 6'5" and go for a very fast drive without being a danger or a menace to others on the road, which is very important. And I feel so much better. And the world around me, I can see the world around me reacting to it because it's my passion that creates that sense of prayer. And the world around it reacts to it. They understand what I'm saying. And also the temple, my reaction also with the temples as well. I just came back from Egypt with another group, which is that group is like sold out for years. There's like 350 people on a waiting list. And the idea is to basically go there to these places and state your function. Before you arrive in Egypt or any place, state your function. That's your prayer. Why did you come on this tour? And when they say, well, I came because of you, well, that doesn't count. Okay. I am not the reason for the tour. You're the reason for the tour. I'm just the mouthpiece. And I said, just remember what brought you here, because that's your prayer. And just remember that every day, because one of these temples will have heard that prayer and that thought. And if it's honestly meant and it's well directed and it's full of passion, then you will find that somewhere on this trip, you're going to be crying like, I don't know, something that cries very much. And I see grown men, complaining after 5 days, they haven't had an experience yet. And all the women are having experiences. And I said, well, just you wait till you get to Edfu. Why? Don't think it through. Don't logicalize it. Just wait. And sure enough, you get to Edfu, and I just watch grown men with tears in their eyes. You think, I've done my job. It's wonderful. So that's their way of doing prayer. We all have a different ones. And usually when I go to these places, I just set a little intent. And I say, what is this place for? What is it here to teach? And how can I teach it in a better way? And that's my prayer to the temple. I just go walking. I expect nothing in return. And when I do, I'm pleasantly surprised that when I get back to the car, I'm writing like a gibbering idiot.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I love that. Like, what is this place meant to teach me, and setting that intention early on. We have a huge audience, listening from the Middle East. So I'm sure that they're going to be very interested to learn more about what you're doing in Egypt. I'm also just personally curious. My parents are from Iraq, and curious if,
Ah.
yeah, if you've also seen any kind of interesting, portals in other parts of the Middle East beyond the pyramids.
Oh, they're everywhere. Unfortunately, they're being destroyed and dismantled one by warfare or fundamentalist religion. It's pretty sad. One of the ones I really pray for is the Blue Mosque at Isfahan in Iran. That's one place which I have yet to see, and I really would like to see it. And I hope that no one lays a finger on it, because it's one of the most beautiful odes to spirituality. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Buddhist, Christian. It doesn't matter. It's above all of that. It's a piece that was built with love to describe the Creator God. That's one of them for certain. And there's a lot of the mounds as well that border around Iraq, Iran, and also to the north in Armenia, and also around Siberia, Ukraine, Crimea. I won't call it Russian Crimea. I'll call it Ukrainian Crimea. All of those mounds originally went down to the Sumerian provinces before Sumeria was created, and they formed the fundamental pin of that culture in the Middle East. They originally came from the Armenian highlands. I had no idea until I was researching my current book. And it turns out that a lot of these places, they look like artificial mountains, but when you go in, they have these small stone chambers which only go about a third of the way inside, and that's where the spiritual leaders of these sects used to go. They used to basically sit around in these circles on the interior and go into the shamanic state. And they've even found these cups made of gold, which have tinges of narcotics and cocaine in them, while they were actually smoking a specific herb in the chamber. They will also take a narcotic to put themselves in a mildly sort of shamanic state, and then bring back information. So these places are very, very important. They are what would become in later years the mounds and the giants' graves of France and Britain, and they're still there to this very day.
Wow, fascinating. Wow. Freddie, I'd love to understand a little bit more about what drew you to this world and this space. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Like, what really brought you here?
Oh, my journey was, I think that we're all sort of preordained to come here to do something. And some people are very lucky. They figure it out from day one and they die blissfully happy. Others, they kind of know that something's going on, and then they get distracted by beautiful girls, beautiful boys, shiny cars, big houses. And I kind of went there. I was drawing pyramids when I was 3. And then because of, personal experiences, home life, school life, which was absolutely awful, I slowly made my way over to the world of hard rock music, which I had big dreams of becoming a rock guitarist with long hair and watching 8,000 armpits raised towards me in glory. Because essentially I was so lacking in ego. I think I had a negative or deficit number in the ego department when I was growing up. It was kind of funny. And so I kind of made up for it by going much more into the material world to look for things which would give me self-worth. And I went for all of that. I mean, I made lots of money. I was a creative director in advertising. I got awards for my work. I was a professional photographer. Yes, I was in a rock band as well. I knew I didn't quite have the talent that it took, and I was quite self-aware about that. And just as well. Otherwise, I would have died an unhappy life in some drug den somewhere, depressed. But something always stayed with me during my professional life, and that was that something just didn't make any sense. I did not see the world as most people see it. I always felt myself to be slightly separate from everything, like I'm an observer, a watcher. That there's a piece of glass between me and everything else. And during times when I was fired from my job for having a conscience and saying things like, no, we can't sell artificial sweetness to people because those things kill you, and they're the things that make you fat. And it's true, by the way. So I'd be in my porch, sitting at home, navel grazing, and going, why am I being, losing? Why do I lose my job because I have a conscience? I'm trying to do the right thing here. And it was at those moments I look at my shelves and go, wait a minute. I bought that book on the pyramids like 15 years ago. I never got a chance to read it. So rather than looking for a job, I sit down reading these books, and slowly something just awoke in me. And then the crop circle world appeared in front of me, and I knew exactly what it was when I first saw it. I mean, I just knew what it was saying. Of course, I couldn't explain it, but I had to go and put myself knee deep into it and research it. And lo and behold, I became a best-selling author with my first book, which has just celebrated its 20th anniversary, actually, and still selling like hotcakes. And it was at that moment I took a leap of faith, because I realized there was something else going on here in the world, and it was of great benefit to people. And it was my direct experiences of being levitated inside a crop circle, of being taken out of body, of meeting the people who were behind the core of the crop circles, who I've since met, by the way, coming out of the stones in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And I had no idea that was even possible. It was those moments that gave me the confidence to slip away from a lucrative yet totally fruitless career, doing something else that I really had no passion for, other to raise my bank balance. Take a big leap of faith and go into the work that I'm doing now. And I haven't stopped touring in 22 years. It's difficult and it has a lot of challenges and it's very lonely, but I love what I do. And I see people reacting to it positively. And every day I get a thank you email from somebody saying that something that I wrote has changed their lives for the better. And I can't ask for anything better than that. So I can honestly say that it was my direct experiences in the natural world through interacting with the spirit world, whether it's in the crop circle, a pyramid, Stonehenge, or a giant's grave, or in an Irish graveyard where you're standing there and there's a little pixie holding on to your fingers, looks very naked with an onion head and a big belly. I mean, and they have they're particularly proud. If you try to pick them up, they'll start sort of screaming at you in a very funny way. Those things change you. I mean, those experiences change you, and you begin to appreciate people who've been laughed at because of these experiences. And now I see see them as being very important people in the way that shapes our metaphysical culture. So yeah, I think through experience, direct experience, and also by having that self-confidence of seeing my work actually bring back some kind of living has given me that confidence to go forward and keep doing it. So let's hope it stays that way, because I have no plans to retire.
That's amazing, Freddie. Amazing. Wow. And what sort of things have surprised you the most on this journey? If you look back at your career in this space, what has surprised you the most?
Oh, that's a difficult one. The hypocrisy of people. I mean, I lost my marriage, my friends, my house, everything. All the people that I thought had my back. When I went off to do something that basically was a challenge to their worldview, they weren't there. Of course, I've picked up other people along the way, which have kind of helped smooth things out. But yeah, it was actually learning more about human beings is what I've picked up more than anything else. That people are unusual, they're complicated, they are a lot of them are full of fear and unreasoning fear for that. Because they just don't know. They're trying to latch onto someone else's idea or what life is, and one day when they find that that person that they've been following, that their compass was pointing south and not north, well, then they're on the edge of a cliff and they fall off like lemmings. Or if you're self-aware enough, you'll get to the edge of the cliff and you turn back, and learn to rely on yourself and your own experiences. That's been the biggest surprise of all. We have all these potentials around us, and in the end, it's about you. It's a very selfish journey when you think about it. You're here to try and improve yourself, and if you're lucky, you'll improve other people along the way. If you can do that, if you can leave the world 1% better than when you found it, then you've done a good job. So the biggest surprise is also to discover that you are not a limited being. You have a huge potential. And where there used to be a lot of fear and anxiety in my life, that's now been replaced by a healthy confidence. And I really have been able to sort of conquer my fear to a huge degree. And in fact, someone was reminding me of this a while ago about the things that I teach on my trips, and specifically in Egypt, which is all to do about the overcoming of fear. A lot of the temples really are designed to do that. And someone asked me, has it worked for you? I said, well, actually, I don't know. And then I thought, actually, I do know. There was one evening about a decade ago, I was coming back home in the evening after watching a really good movie. And, you're walking up the street, and Portland, Maine doesn't have much, if any, violence or any crime. And you're walking in the evening by yourself, and you're thinking about the movie and what a wonderful time it was, and the plots and the characters. And there's some idiot somewhere on the other side of the street shouting something at me. And, I've come back down to earth. I said, what the hell's he shouting at? He's going on about the fact that, he's got a gun, he's going to shoot me, he's taking me down, MF.
Jeez.
And I thought, and in one split second, I can remember this very clearly now. In one split second, I went through all the possible variations of what could happen. One, he's going to shoot me dead, and that's the end of that. And I thought, well, that's not acceptable. My job isn't finished, and that really annoys me. Two, I can look for a rock and defend myself, and there's nothing on the pavement around me. So I figured, okay, option three, I'm going to turn around and do the one thing he's not expecting. I'm going to project confidence. I'm going to put the fear back into him. And I just turned around and started walking very vibrantly towards him with that look that says, don't mess with me. If you hurt me, I'm taking you down with me. And next life, I'm going to deal with you on the other side, and it's going to hurt. And he just ran. And I realized, wow, I didn't have any fear. I mean, I should have just put my hands up and given up. I didn't. I actually confronted that, and I thought, my God, I'm practicing what I'm preaching. And since then, it's actually come in very handy. I mean, there have been cases where, again, situations which have been, as we call, dodgy, involving very serious people with big guns in certain parts of the world. And I just get out of the bus. The tour group's feeling a bit anxious. I just get out of the bus with a big box of sweets or cookies, which is a great way to bring down any kind of tension. And these guys, I think we're in Guatemala at the time. It was a police checkpoint, and they're looking a bit serious. Looked like they wanted a bit of money, which is usually what solves the problem. And I started speaking in Spanish and offering them some sweets and talking about their mirrored Ray-Bans and how cool they were. And they had the biggest smiles on their face. And after about 5 minutes of exchanging sweets and talking about Ray-Bans and making them feel good about themselves, because that was the whole point. They wanted to be taken seriously. They suddenly realized that we're of absolutely no consequence whatsoever. We don't mean any harm. And they let us go. And the whole bus was like, I can't believe you just did that. I said, well, that's why you fail. You see, that's the whole purpose. It's about learning to conquer your fear. So that's been one of the biggest things that surprised me. It's about myself and how I've been able to change as an individual, having gone completely in the opposite direction, which means that if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody else.
Wow. Wow. Wow, amazing, amazing. And Freddie, what do you want to tell our listeners as your main takeaway about their wellness, their well-being, what's your call to action for folks who are tuning in?
Drink heavily, take camphor regularly because it's a good hallucinogenic and it cures all kinds of diseases, including COVID, by the way.
Wait, take what?
I'm actually very serious about that. Camphor was the one ingredient that actually cured bubonic plague, ironically, in China. And it's great for cleaning your respiratory system. You get a great night's sleep, you get great visions, and you maintain a good, healthy series of lungs. And a little bit of scotch is also very good for keeping the bacteria away. But again, the trick is to, lubricate the machinery. Don't overoil it. That's the rule. But at the same time, and very seriously, don't beat yourself up about getting things wrong because if you were perfect, you wouldn't have come here. I mean, think about it. Any god, any person that's achieved everything, why would they bother coming here? The whole point of incarnating is to come and perfect yourself. You still don't know everything. So if you mess up, take steps to remedy it. Do corrections, do apologies, forget about the ego thing, and then just realize, okay, I'm not perfect. I can make mistakes. The trick is not to fall down too often, and learn to live another day and do it better again. Because at the end, no one's going to judge you but yourself. And the Egyptians made sure of that because when you finally do cross over, there'll be 42 entities reminding you of what you've done and what you haven't done, and then you have to do a self-assessment form. That's how it works. And then you can choose to come back, or you can choose not to. You can say, I know where I went wrong, but I've learned from that. Now I want to go and live on a planet surrounded by baby pandas and baby elephants for another million years, which actually sounds like a very good idea. So the trick is not to beat yourself up over the things that you do. Learn to get the right tools. Don't believe everybody all the time because not everybody is perfect, including me. And take the tools that make sense and then come up with your own toolbox. And that way you will never go wrong.
Amen. I love that. I love that. Wow. Freddy, you are so fascinating. I learned so much from this conversation. I feel like there's just a wealth of knowledge in you. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your work, and also where they can order the Healing Crop Circle cards?
Oh, that's very easy. Just go to invisibletemple.com because it's all about the invisible temple, if you know what I mean.
Okay, amazing. And we'll leave that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Freddy.
Oh, my pleasure.
This was so wonderful. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. You can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality.